For a career starter, the skill that I would really encourage them to cultivate, curiosity and learning. Because the only thing we know for certain is that the world is going to change at breakneck speed. The speed of change is just going to get faster and faster and faster. So you have to be curious. You have to develop an agility in your thinking so that the way you do your work now is not how you're going to do your work in 18 months, 2 years' time.
On today's episode of Careers Unwrapped, I'm excited to have with us Nicola Semple, who's a lot of things, but a distinguished career and confidence coach. So Nicola brings a decade of experience more in helping professionals navigate their career paths with clarity, with confidence, and having herself transitioned from a successful career in business consulting to founding her own coaching practice. Nicola now has dedicated herself to empowering individuals to uncover their true potential and achieve their professional goals. And today, she's going to give us advice, hopefully, on what she sees about how people best develop their career, but also to share some of her own journey and her own personal learning and experiences along the way. So, Nicola, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's great to be here.
So, careers, it's one of those words that people talk about, and then you don't often stop and think, well, what does a career actually mean? And I often see a career as a journey with decision points. And there are sometimes lots of those decision points. Sometimes they're massive ones, sometimes less. Do I go left here or do I go right here? So I'm interested to start really from your own perspective and your own career. What have been the major decision points for you, the big junctions of choice?
Sure. So I guess the first and possibly the biggest decision point was about joining a graduate program in the first place. If I go way, way back, I did a degree in international business and languages, came towards the end of that degree and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. And so I was figuring what I need to do is just get some experience. And so I joined a graduate program with Accenture, a management consultancy. And really, the decision point there was about, do I enter the corporate world or not? Because there were lots of things in my mind at the time. Should I go off and train to be a teacher? Was the academic route the right one for me? But I decided to go down that corporate pathway, thinking, well, it'll give me some good experience. And then when I figure out what I want to do when I grow up, then I can pivot to that. But I'll know that I'll always have that good experience under my belt. And then that kind of carried on for 8-10 years of just getting that experience under my belt because, quite frankly, I didn't know what else to do. I was learning. I was being successful. I was being promoted. So why wouldn't I just keep on heading down that path? If I didn't know what I wanted to do instead, why wouldn't I just keep on heading down that path? And then the next decision point came, which was I got to a stage where, as much as I was enjoying the work, I was not enjoying the travel and I was not enjoying the lifestyle that went along with being in that management consultancy world. And so the decision point there was about moving to an internal role within the organisation I was working for, rather than being client-facing. And that, while you're still working for the same organisation, is quite a big jump to make because you go from being the fee earner to being an overhead. And the way in which you are perceived within the organisation is quite different. And so having been around that world for quite a long time at that point, I knew exactly what I was getting into. But the trade-off for me was very much about letting go of that lifestyle, of that travel, of those long hours. And so that was another big decision point.
It is interesting that post-learning, so decision point, whether that's post-school, post-college, post-university, and you're making that first step into the working world and you don't really know. Now, of course, some people do. Some people say, right, I'm going to study this because I want to do this. I'm going to do veterinary science because I want to be a vet. But that's actually quite rare.
It is so rare, right? And there are some people out there. So I'll give you an example. My daughter is now 15. She's doing her GCSEs. We've been going through the college application process. We went to tour a college last week. Absolutely fantastic. And we bumped into one of our friends and she said, oh, I definitely want to come here because they have a specific pathway for those that want to go into veterinary science. I was like, wow, how at 15 do you know that that is what you want to do? And some people do, but they really are the exception.
I saw a piece of careers research last week done with people in their 30s and 40s about how many of them were doing the job that they thought they would do when they started out in their 20s. And it was just 15%, which means 85% of people were in a career that was not on their mind when they started out. When I left university, I worked as a waiter in a Harvester restaurant for a bit. I tried to sell some water filters. And then I rather randomly joined the army and spent 5 years there and loved it. So none of those were things I was thinking of doing when I was at school.
And I think that 85% number is a recurring number. So the other interesting dimension at the moment is how rapidly the world is changing. So there is some research from the Institute of the Future, which I think it was done in conjunction with the University of Glasgow, but I'm not sure. And this research was carried out in 2019. And what they said was that by 2030, 85% of the jobs that would exist in 2030 didn't exist in 2019. So how can anybody be coming out of school or university, be right at the start of their career and know what that career is going to look like? It is literally impossible at the moment.
There's a first message there to any career startup. Maybe somebody who's about to take their first role or still studying or in their first job, and you don't really know what you want to do. Don't worry. That really is the normal situation, and you will get choices as you move forward. So don't overstress it if today you don't know exactly what you want to do for a career, because the jobs are going to change as well and new opportunities will open up to you.
Yeah, and it's just about taking that next step, and the next step will lead to the next step, which will lead to the next step.
So putting your career coaching hat on now and looking back at the 10 years or so you spent not just with Accenture, but I think you were with KPMG and EY Ernst & Young as well as a consultant. What did you take away from those roles that you think has made you a better coach?
The number one thing is adaptability. So when you work in a professional services environment, you are always working with different clients. Even the teams that you work in from your own organization, they change all the time as well. And so what you develop very quickly is an ability to work with a really wide range of people very effectively, very quickly. You've got to form those teams in a short space of time so that you can come together, use all of your collective skills and deliver great value for your client.
So with that experience you've now got with you, how did you make the transition from the relative safety of well-paid employment in large international organizations to say, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out on my own with the inherent risk of that and become a coach. How did you go through that decision-making process, first of all?
So it was an evolution. The trigger point for me was when I had my children. So even although I had moved into an internal role, it was still very much that long hours culture. Bearing in mind, this was 15 years ago. So flexible working, hybrid working wasn't really top of the agenda. And I had my first child and I just thought, to have the lifestyle I want to have, it is not going to be conducive for me to return to that world. But equally, for financial reasons, yes, but also for my own intellectual sanity and curiosity, there was still work that I wanted to do, but I was in a position where I could start to select that work for myself. And so in the first 4 years, it was very much on a part-time basis. And then that allowed me to build the business up over time. And to begin with, again, there was another decision point in there. So to begin with, I was supporting women who were deciding whether to return to work after maternity leave. And so it was very much mirroring my own experience. I had been through something, I could support others through that process. I built a business around that. And as I built the business around it, people were saying to me, how have you built this business? Because I want to do something similar. And so I then went into a period of mentoring and coaching entrepreneurs who were starting up on their own, so that they could build a business flexibly around their other commitments. And then that evolved again. And then that evolved. We were very much focusing on their mindset. So I trained in mindset coaching and everything that comes along with that, got my accreditation for career coaching, and then returned to working with, it was almost like going full circle. So I went away for a few years, picked up all these other skills around coaching and supporting people, and then came back to supporting women in professional services, people who were just like me, to help them find more happiness and fulfillment in their own career.
And one sees a lot of people who attach the word coach to themselves. And you see it a lot on social media. You see it through professional social media as well, LinkedIn and others. But I sometimes just sit back and look and go, well, how are you a coach? Why are you a coach? Why would I trust perhaps my decision-making, some of my thinking? Why would I give you influence over me? So how does somebody go about identifying and choosing the right coach for their particular needs?
I think that is an absolutely brilliant question, and a question that more people should be asking. So number one, it's all about chemistry. So I will never work with somebody unless I've had a conversation with them in advance so that they can check out whether I'm the right person for them. And I can understand, am I the right person to help them? Because there's often that I will refer people on to other colleagues of mine if I think they're going to be a better fit. The other thing to look at is accreditation. Is the coach accredited by a professional body? So my accreditation is through the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. That's not an easy process. So my entry level accreditation with them, it required 70 training hours, 100 coaching hours, an exam, and a performance appraisal where they listen into your coaching session to make sure that you're working in a way that is ethical and beneficial for the client. I've just gone through my reaccreditation process where I'm accrediting at a higher level. And again, that was like, I think it was 150 hours of training. It's now 500 coaching hours. It's 2 lots of performance approval, and it's sitting the exam again. So you've got to show a real dedication and commitment to your own development and your coaching skills. But the client ultimately benefits from that. And so these are the things that I think people should be looking out for in terms of whether this is the right coach for me. Because you're absolutely right. Like if you go onto social media, particularly something like Instagram or TikTok, the whole world's a coach. But what does that actually mean? And another thing that's popped into my head, which I always share with people, are testimonials. So it's all very well for me to say what my approach is and how I work with people, but you've got to hear it from the horse's mouth. That listen to the people that I have helped, and they will tell you how I can help them, but also the style and the approach that I take. And that goes back to having the conversation. Will this person have the right style for me?
And who was, without naming them, but who was the first person who trusted you then to pay you to be their coach? Because somebody had to go first.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And actually, your distinction in terms of paying me is a good one, because I'd been doing this for years. Even when I was in my corporate role, I was the person that would go for lunch with someone and help them figure out what their next career step was. So, when they say do the thing that comes naturally to you, even although you don't think it's something that you do, this has absolutely been me. So if I then think about who was the first person that paid me, it was a lady called Emma, and she had just been made redundant from her role, and she had no idea what she wanted to do next. And it was like a 2 or 3 hour intensive session to help her map out what her strategy was going to be in terms of the types of roles she was going to go out looking for and how she was going to do that. Because it was at a time when the job market was not, probably quite similar to now, where the job market was tricky. And so it was unlikely that she was going to find that role through applying for jobs. She was going to have to tap into her network and find that role in a more creative way. And that's exactly what she then went on to do.
It's interesting. I'm a very late comer to coaching, as in to being coached. And I look back, especially over periods of job change, but also starting my business some 20 years ago, and think, wow, if at different times I'd have had the right sort of coaching, what a difference it might have made. And my own perspective now, when I have had coaching more recently, is I've looked at it as a really good investment, because although it does, you do think, hang on, I'm going to be spending a chunk of money with this person. When you put that money against the difference between you maybe growing the business a bit faster, or between getting a next job that's better paid than the one you've got, or even if you're done the case of Emma, getting a job faster than you might have, the return on investment of coaching can be incredibly beneficial. And that's purely in a commercial level, let alone what it can do for you in terms of confidence and happiness in your life and things like that. I'm not trying to do an ad campaign.
No, but you're doing a very good one.
Just I've seen it now myself and had coaching of very, very different types, which I specifically went out for saying, actually, it's this thing I want to work on. Who can I get to help me do that?
And just back to the question you asked me earlier about how do people find the right coach for them? It's also, in a lot of cases, really important to know what it is you want to be coached on so that you find the right person with the right specialism. Because a coach can coach anyone, but they will naturally have a proclivity to be more effective with certain issues and certain types of people. And to give you a concrete example of that, I worked with a guy a couple of years ago, absolute superstar, came to me. He had been made redundant about a year previously. And he came to me, I had a little spreadsheet that had the 200 plus jobs that he had applied for in the last 12 months. And he's saying, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've applied for all these jobs. Why is it not coming to me? And we looked at it. He was a head of sales, and these were all sales jobs that he was going for. And so I did a bit of work with him. We did a values exercise, which is all about kind of what's important to you in the context of your work. And he came to the conclusion that he hated sales. What he loved was customer service. And so, again, we did some coaching around that, repositioned his thinking. He then started looking for head of customer service roles, and within 3 months, he had a job, because he was then looking for the right job, not just the job he had been doing that he thought he should carry on with. And so he'd spent 12 months throwing jelly at the wall, hoping that something was going to stick eventually. But when he actually got clear on what it was that he wanted and where his skills would best lend themselves, it all came together pretty quickly for him.
Interesting. What we're going to do then, if you're willing, is we're going to try and do a little mini masterclass here. We know that a lot of our listeners are what I might call career starters. So people who are probably in their 20s and are in their first or second job. So they've got the money coming in. They're okay on that basic front at the moment, but now they are thinking about direction for the future. And if one of them is with us now in the room, how do they start? What process do they need to go through? What questions do they need to ask themselves when they're thinking, I don't know where I want to go? What's the money, but I don't know where I want to go? What should they be doing first?
So a couple of things I would suggest they do. First is, I call it like a little bit of detective work where they look backwards. So get a bit of paper, open up a document on PowerPoint or whatever way you want to do it, and draw out your career timeline. Just draw a straight line from where you started. And when I say where you started, I mean the very first job you ever did. So that could be like babysitting or pet sitting or anything at all. But draw out a timeline from very first job you did to the present day, and then map out all of your career milestones. What were the highs? What were the lows? And really take some time to reflect on that and think about, okay, what can I learn from this? When I had a high, what was happening? What was I experiencing? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? When I had a low, exactly the same. What was I experiencing? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? And then really dig deep into that and work out, get the clues that you can from it, because there's a lot of information there. If I think about my own personal experience, until I really felt proficient in my coaching over the past 4 or 5 years, I had never experienced that level of job satisfaction since I was 15 and working in a chemist on a Saturday. So all of these big roles that I had that came with all the great things of the high salary and the travel and all that wonderful stuff, none of that gave me the satisfaction that working in that chemist at the age of 15 gave me. So I would really encourage anybody who's in that position of, I don't know how to move forward, to do that exercise of mapping out their career to date. What can you learn from it? And then as a next step to that, starting to look into the future, ask yourself the question, what's important to me that I need to get from my work? And brainstorm all of that. Come up with your big list of things. It could be flexibility. It could be financial reward. It could be recognition. Whatever it is for you, think about what are those things that are important to me that I need to get from my work? And then look at that as a big picture and start to use that to inform what's going to come next for you.
So a lot of that is a need to do some proper soul searching, really, to have a chance to step back, take a breath and say, and look at yourself, which is something I've seen a lot of people are not that comfortable with. It's come unnaturally to them. And the things you mentioned there, especially the career timelines. Now, my career is obviously, there have been a number of years of it, so I can look back. And I do think that part of what you describe is something I may have done subconsciously. So, for example, when I was, as I mentioned, in the army, one of the things I reflected on 10 years or so later when I was starting We Are Futures is I really enjoyed the times when it was actually training young soldiers. And these young soldiers came from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different levels of education experience, different families, and just the training with them that saw them develop their skills and saw them develop their confidence. And that was one of the big sort of highs for me at that work. And it's something I've definitely taken forward from there in the creation of We Are Futures.
And the thing is, once you start looking, and I appreciate if you've only been working for a couple of years, it might be harder for you to find these clues. But if you've got 4 or 5 years work experience, when you look at that timeline, you will find clues. So a big driver for me is about making a difference. Now, it might be that I'm making a difference. For example, last week, I was coaching a CEO who had some really tricky decisions to make about the future of his business. And I coached him through that process, helped unravel his thinking, and he came away at the end of that with a really clear plan of where he was going to go next. So that made a difference to him. But back when I was 15 working in that chemist, I used to go to the houses of elderly ladies and measure them up for support types because they couldn't physically get themselves to the pharmacy. And I made a big difference to them. Now, that's 2 very different populations that we're talking about, but the underlying feeling that I got from it was exactly the same. I had tangibly made a difference to that person's day.
Interesting. One of the things we hear a lot about is skills and the need for people to have skills and soft skills, life skills, employability skills. These are all mentioned. Now, we also deal with an education system in this country, across the UK, actually, which is very subject focused. And the other people leading it to go into a skills focused employment world. From your experience, what do you think businesses mean when they talk about skills? And what are the skills that can really be developed that will help somebody in any sector, in any industry? What are the things that people should be thinking, I need to be better at this skill?
So to answer the first part of your question, what do businesses mean when they're talking about skills? I think half the time they don't know. And I think part of the reason they don't know is going back to that statistic that I mentioned earlier about 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 didn't exist in 2019. The world is moving so quickly that they might know what they need for the next 12 months, but they don't know what they need for the next 5 years. So I think there's a tricky situation there to navigate. In terms of, for a career starter, the skill that I would really encourage them to cultivate, curiosity and learning. Because the only thing we know for certain is that the world is going to change at breakneck speed. The speed of change is just going to get faster and faster and faster. So you have to be curious. You have to develop an agility in your thinking so that the way you do your work now is not how you're going to do your work in 18 months, 2 years' time. And so getting used to, I can't say rolling with the punches, but just embracing the changes that come up and being able to be nimble enough to navigate those changes, I think is something that we are all going to have to be able to do. And if you are at the start of your career, you're going to have to do it more than you and I have, Mark.
Yeah. So if the Nicola of today, with all of her experience as a coach, as a consultant, could go back and visit the 18-year-old Nicola, what advice do you think you might give to your younger self to help them avoid some pitfalls or mistakes, or to advance a little bit? Well,
that is such a brilliant question. I think it would just be chill out. So the longer you progress through your career, what you learn is it really is a marathon and not a sprint. And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but oh my goodness, it's so true, because you're going to be working for a really long time. And we're going to be working for longer and longer amounts of time. So we've got lots of time. So I would be going back and telling that Nicola, it doesn't all have to happen now. So I can remember very clearly in the first 3 months of being on my graduate scheme, you were assigned something called a career counsellor. And I had my meeting with my career counsellor, and I went and I said, look, I don't understand what's going on. I am not being given the type of work that I thought I was going to be given when I joined this organisation. And she basically said, join the club, because that work isn't available at the moment. So we just have to crack on with what we've got in front of us. But I was so desperate to do the thing that I thought I had to do, instead of just being a bit more open-minded, and all experience is good experience. And so just embrace that. And I think I would really tell 18-year-old Nicola, just enjoy it a bit more. You don't have to take it so seriously, because it all works out in the end. If you just keep following the path and trusting yourself, it all works out in the end.
I would observe in relation to that. But first of all, I completely agree with it. Just chill out a bit more. But also, an 18-year-old today is being brought up in an environment where there is pressure on them to achieve certain grades, to have a picture of what they want from their career, to have an idea of their direction, to select their exams. And it's a more pressurized environment than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago at that age. So how do we get the balance right between encouraging people to be resilient, to push themselves forward, but also to chill out and not get over worried about it all?
It is a balance, but I also think there's some education to be done, dare I say, among career professionals and even parents of career starters, in terms of what the world is now like and what those expectations can be like. So I certainly know, and this might be a unpopular opinion, but with children at secondary school, I know the types of career guidance that they are getting. And let's just say it's a wee bit outdated. Yeah. So we need to be sure that our young people, that our career starters, are getting the right advice. And that advice is really, I would say, about embracing the breadth of opportunities that are available to them.
So that chill out message doesn't just apply to back in time to 18-year-old Nicola. It also applies to parents today.
Yeah. Yeah.
To just chill out a bit. Now, one of the initiatives I know you're involved with is called I Am Remarkable. And I've had a look into that, but I think it'd be really good to just hear from you a bit about what it is, why it exists, and also what you bring into it from your career coaching angle.
So the I Am Remarkable initiative was initially founded by Google, and it was initially set up to support females, but it's now expanded out to be females and other underrepresented groups. And the idea behind it is to build confidence and to build the ability to self-promote. So we want everyone, and that by everyone, I mean absolutely everyone, from career starter to those who are on the brink of retirement and beyond, to be able to identify and acknowledge what makes them remarkable. And not just to identify and acknowledge it, but to say it out loud and to share it with other people. And so I Am Remarkable is effectively, it's a workshop, which can either be run online or it can be run within organizations. It is completely free. So if there is anybody listening to this who is interested in finding out more, just Google I Am Remarkable, and it will take you to where you can participate in one of these courses for yourself. And effectively, it is 90 minutes to 2 hours where you get together with a group of people. It can be from all around the world, and you are given some support. And I'm not going to give too much away because otherwise people won't go to the workshop, but you are given some support to help you identify what makes you remarkable and to really own it. Because we all have things that make us remarkable.
Great. I'm glad we brought that in at the end, because if you are listeners and that does strike a chord with you, go and have a look at it. It's well worth checking out.
And it's completely free. So for a couple of hours of your time, why wouldn't you?
So, Nicola, we've covered so much in such a short range of time. We've spoken about your development as a coach, but also about how people should go around choosing a coach they feel it's suitable for them. I gave a slightly over-enthusiastic endorsement of coaching as a whole, but get the right coach, and it's fantastic. We also had a very, very quick masterclass for any career starters wondering about where they want to go. And those 2 pieces of advice as first steps there. Do a career timeline of the career to date, pinpointing the highs and lows. What has made you feel great, not great? And then also look into the future about what's important to you and get a sense back, get it written down from there. We also touched upon skills, and it was almost the Ted Lasso-esque piece of advice in terms of be curious. And I definitely agree with that. And linking that to lifelong learning, you've got to keep moving forward and developing your knowledge. You've been curious about those because the careers market and job roles are going to be changing so fast around you. And lastly, within that, just chill out, which is probably a great line to end on. Most people end up doing jobs, roles, or careers that they did not think they were going to be doing when they started out. So be curious, push forward, keep learning. And when you get to the decision points in your career, pick what you think's right for you. But Nicola, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really wonderful conversation. I think so much to take out of it for anyone who's thinking about developing their own career. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
This podcast is sponsored by We Are Futures. To find out more about We Are Futures and how we can introduce your brand, business, or organisation to the mass markets of tomorrow, visit www.wearefutures.com. Make sure to search for Careers Unwrapped in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at We Are Futures, thanks for listening.